Could I just check if any public speakers put their cameras off until it's the public speaking item? If that's okay, and your mics. Thank you. Okay, let's ready.
All right, thank you. Welcome to Joint Scrutiny, Thursday the 7th of December. This is a rearranged meeting for this evening. I am Councillor Stephen Gavryshak, and I'm co-chair of this meeting with Catherine Foxall, but we alternate chair. Catherine did it last time and I'm doing it today. We have got a very large agenda with lots of people attending. So therefore, the sooner we get on with it, the better. Can I ask for apologies for absence, Candida?
Yeah,
thank you.
We've had apologies from Councillor Ed Sadler. We have Councillor Tony Morgan substituting today. We've also had apologies from Councillors Alexandrian Cantor and Andrew Skinner, and also Councillor Joe Robb is intending to join us a bit later online.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, urgent business and chair's announcements. I have no urgent business and I have no chair's announcements. So therefore, 3, are there any declarations of interest pertaining to the agenda items at the moment? I see none. Thank you very much. Item 4, minutes. I will ask for any changes to the minutes that you wish. Councillor Sue Cooper has picked up on page 6 that the reference to RPI should be changed to CPI, and there are 2 references to that. So I will be recommending that particular change. Any other items on the minutes?
Chair, I just noticed the bottom of page 7, the last bullet point, the insulation discussion should related to Wantage, not Farringdon Leisure Centre.
Farringdon will have it, so it should be Wantage.
The discussion was about Wantage.
Wantage will have its insulation needs addressed, not just so change Farringdon to Wantage. Okay, can I say with those 3 minor amendments, are we happy to accept the minutes? I propose acceptance. All those in favour? Okay, thanks. That is done. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have now a number of public speakers. Can I say from the chair that I will only allow comments to do with the agenda items that are on the agenda at the moment. We have a lot of speakers talking about the joint local plan, and let me say at the outset that item 9 on the agenda is a consultation to do with joint local plan. It's not about the actuality of the local plan. It is how we are going to consult about it. So therefore, if you wander off the consultation of the joint local plan, I will reserve my right as chair to actually step in and ask you to move on to another subject. Okay, thank you. Right, the first member of the public I have is James Barlow, who is a South Oxfordshire District Councillor. James, are you here?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yes, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, thank you, officers and members, for your extensive, constructive and bold work on the joint local plan consultation documents. I welcome the proposed variation or variety of consultation mechanisms, but I will concentrate purely on the in a nutshell document, since I imagine that this is the one that many residents will engage with. I ask this panel to consider 6 points. Firstly, that the overview includes more about our overall vision and showcases more of the progressive story illustrated in the preferred options documents. For example, how this joint local plan will meet the need to adapt to increasingly serious climate change, provide the much needed social and community-led housing, which comes to the fore in the other document, but not in this, and how we'll continue to protect the areas of outstanding natural beauty and green belts, which have global and national interest. Secondly, that we show in the helpful graphic in section 2, both the scale of Oxford's reportedly unmet housing need and the scale of the further homes proposed in this 2041 plan, so it's clear the scale of both of those things. That we ask in section 1 whether respondents would prefer us to claim additional exceptional circumstances in the manner of, say, North Somerset currently are, to reduce the new housing load further and give our plan more chance of being in line with the reality of the ecological limits and need to adapt to climate change in our acknowledging in our corporate plan. Fourthly, that in section 3 we might show the amount of renewable energy generation needed to offset the total extra embodied carbon emissions of building 920 homes each year, so that people understand again the tensions that we're delicately trying to manage between this, our joint local plan, our corporate plan, and the reality of the situations that we're facing. Fifthly, that we consistently, as the leaders we are, use language and symbols that reflect the reality of the situation. For example, the water quality and infrastructure photograph could be replaced by the Thames Water Event Duration Monitoring Map, which on a daily basis provides strong evidence of the need for our strong water policies and why we might need to invoke the Grampian conditions as other districts reportedly have. And then in section 12 show that we know that nature isn't just a nice to have luxury service to us, rather a necessity that our lives depend on. And then finally, my sixth point that I'd ask you to consider, that in the neighbourhood plan section, we offer the option for those neighbourhood plans who have ambition, but their ambition mentioned in the description may not be about housing growth at all, but perhaps more green and blue space, so that they can adapt and be resilient to climate change, given their understanding, which may be different to ours, of the seriousness of the emergency, not just about delivering more houses. So to sum up, in this way, I'd like you to consider how we can build on the innovative good work of officers and members to date and demonstrate that we've listened to residents, climate scientists and ecologists, that we've learned from other authorities, and we are truly leading for our residents with a plan fit for the socially and environmentally turbulent decades that it covers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James, very much. You've put your points very well, and I'm sure that when we come to discuss it, some of those points will be picked up. But thank you for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
I now turn to Sue Roberts.
Hello.
Sue, hello.
Hi.
It's good to see you again.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Right, Sue, you have 3 minutes. Please.
Okay. It's really along the same lines as James, that we've got options which might not have been very clearly put forward about how different ways in which the numbers might be reduced. The numbers, as we know, we've already had 10,000 houses built, and that is quite nice for people to see. It's very difficult for people to get a clear view of what these numbers all mean when they just see them like that. And we are suffering as a result of it. Our wildlife has vanished, and the social justice issues are so much worse. My example is my nephew, who had to leave Didcot because he couldn't work for lack of childcare, and this was after his sickly 2-year-old was turned away from all the surgeries. So James mentioned the option of looking at a constrained approach, and whether that could be put into the nutshell policy to say that these are different ways of getting the numbers down. So that approach was taken in North Somerset. Liam Fox MP supports North Somerset in reducing housing numbers by 1/3 from the standard method. In that way, South Oxfordshire, for example, which has got something like 65% of its land is either AONB or Greenbelt, as is shown in the preferred options, it could theoretically get its housing down from 12,000 to 8,000. And I think we should put forward the possibility of doing the stepped approach, which was what we did last time, so that we wouldn't have an unbuildable number of houses at the beginning, rather than having them all front loaded with 900 and odd a year up until 2036, that's one, and then going to the lower number, whether we can push back some of those and backload it so that it's a more gentle transition, which we desperately need in order for wildlife and social justice things to catch up with where we are now. There's an excellent section in the housing section of the preferred plan, which talks about supporting homes that wish to subdivide into more units. Now that in itself could be taken up as part of our windfall.
So I'll just say you have about 15 seconds left, please.
Yeah. So the windfall component of our housing allocation could increase, reducing new build with a planned approach for social housing and helping homeowners to realise their assets through subdivision and retrofit. Thank you.
So thank you very much for that. And I'm sure those points will be picked up. Thank you very much. David Marsh.
Take a seat there, David.
David, hello. David is the Vale District Secretary for Campaign for Rural England, CPRE. So thank you for coming, David.
2.5 or 3 minutes?
You have 3 minutes.
Keep it to 2.5.
Well, even better. Thank you, David, when you're ready.
Well, during the development of the current Vale plan, I was also chair of Harwell Parish Council. Now, I remember many difficult meetings objecting to unrealistic housing numbers and inappropriate site allocations. So it's great to welcome this plan and to thank the officers and the councillors who have got us to this stage. You're looking for feedback on the consultation documents rather than the plan itself. So I've got some comments about the plan in a nutshell. And first, to welcome it as a concise document to make it easier for the public to make their comments. If the wording in the nutshell document differs from the actual plan, and specifically differs from the wording of the proposed policies, is there a risk that the consultation summaries will be challenged as irrelevant because they didn't cover the actual plan? That's my first question. The nutshell document, by its very nature, covers only a small number of policies. I count 14 headings, whereas the draft has got 106 policies. As a scrutiny committee, are you persuaded that the right policies have been highlighted? How will feedback be sought for all the other policies not covered in the nutshell? The plan itself rightly puts climate and the environment as its love. Are you persuaded that the nutshell document has the same emphasis? My feeling is that the nutshell focuses too much on housing numbers and not enough on climate. For example, there's no mention of the brilliant policy CE2 to ensure that all new developments use no fossil fuel energy on site. Finally, some nitpicking practical points. Please request a larger font for the text. I struggle to read it. Please consider a printer-friendly version without images and maybe a horizontal response scale instead of a vertical one, just to reduce the amount of paper that gets produced. And please check that bodies such as parish councils, developers, campaign groups, or CPRE will be able to submit a single response document and won't be required to follow the online responses section by section. Behind the scenes, these bodies are going to be circulating drafts to reach agreement on their response, and it's much harder if that response has to be fragmented across the online consultation. Thank you.
David, those are excellent points. Thank you very much. I now ask Andrew Wilkins.
Good evening.
Andrew, good evening. Thank you. You have 3 minutes and it's on the consultation plan. Thank you.
Yeah, Good evening. I'm Andy Wilkins, Chief Exec of Lone Star Land, responsible for the allocated site at Bayswater Farm, Sandhills, Oxford. I'm speaking tonight with regards to item 9 on your agenda and to ensure that councillors are aware of the council's opinion that we submitted on the 30th of November 2023 and the subsequent letter from Lodders solicitors dated 5th of December 2023. To briefly summarise both, the site at Bayswater Farm is deliverable. The county are simply incorrect in their advice to you in that the site cannot be legally accessed. The county have also not provided you with any evidence that there is no capacity in the road network. Therefore, there is nothing to warrant a redetermination of its allocated status. Furthermore, a planning application will be submitted prior to Christmas that will demonstrate the site's deliverability. There is absolutely no merit in the concerns expressed by the County Council, and progressing this argument will lead to judicial review against both councils. We've also highlighted a breach of the Cabinet's procedural rules, paragraph 42 to be exact, in taking this matter to Cabinet before the Scrutiny Committee. We cannot understand how Cabinet can make a decision on this matter in advance of advice from this Scrutiny Committee. Perhaps the Council can explain how this irregularity will be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The legalities we won't comment on at this because we are looking at item 9, which is the discussion of the consultation for us. Your other matters is that we did have a difficult situation in that this committee, yes, is actually being consulted after the Cabinet meeting, but we are assured that all items from this Scrutiny Committee will be taken into account going forward. So anyway, thank you very much for your comment. Thank you. And finally, John Summons, who is a resident. John, hello.
Hi.
You have
good evening.
3 minutes on the consultation, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. I wanted to focus on just one glaring issue with the local plan papers before you this evening regarding local green space designations. I'll provide some context. I can assure you I will make a specific point about how the plan is consulted on. For the uninitiated, local green space designations play a critical role in reassuring communities the green spaces which are important to them will be protected from inappropriate development, providing a level of protection similar to greenbelt. There are around 200 such designations across Oxfordshire. In South and Vale, many have been designated as part of neighbourhood plans. Henley has 12, for example. But there are, of course, vast areas of our districts, including some of our largest settlements, such as Didcot, which are not covered by neighbourhood plans. Those communities are therefore dependent on the local plan to deliver such designations. This is common practice elsewhere. Approximately 20% of local green space designations are made through local plans. And yet the preferred options to be consulted on include neither a policy on local green space designation nor even a mechanism by which residents can suggest green spaces for consideration. Policy HP4 option C suggests officers considered this approach of designating green spaces through the local plan, but advise against doing so because, quote, it would be difficult to identify all the green and open spaces of importance to local communities, and some could be missed. But if you at least put it on the table as part of the consultation, if you were to actually ask residents, as Cherwell and many other district councils have done during their local plan consultations, you may be pleasantly surprised. You may find residents will gladly tell you what green spaces they would like to see protected. And the risk of failing to protect some green spaces should not mean the local plan does not protect any at all. This is a complete cop-out and a huge missed opportunity as the councils head into public consultation. I would urge you to push for better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salmons, very much. Okay, and that actually concludes public participation session. I'm sure that many or all of the points will be picked up when we actually come to item 7 on the agenda. Right, we now turn to item 6, sorry, item 9 on the agenda. Apologies. Right, item 6, work schedule and dates for scrutiny meetings. Candida, do you have any updates on the scrutiny programme? Then I will invite any comments from councillors.
Okay, well, to be honest, for joint scrutiny in particular, there isn't a huge amount of change on the programme at the moment. We've got our next meeting will be 29th of January to look at garden waste permit approach, and then we've got another meeting on 25th of March to look at Didcot Garden Town strategies. So that's where we're at the moment, but welcome any feedback and comments from members.
Any comments, members? Councillor Rawn?
Yeah, I think there has to be some sensible limit to the scale and size of the material that's provided for effective scrutiny, because there is a point at which the size of the items and the length of the number of pages that are submitted for a single meeting get to the point where I think that the premise of scrutiny is undermined, and therefore that I don't want to set a particular limit, but I think that it would be fair to consider what is it reasonable to cover in one meeting. One other small point, on the work programme and on the agenda, it says Joint Local Plan Regulation 18 Part 2 to approve preferred options for consultation. It doesn't say whether the consultation method is correct or how consultation might be done. It says to approve the preferred options which are put forward, and therefore the substance, it seems to me, is what's on the work programme and on the agenda.
Thank you. Lee, I absolutely take your point. The reason was that the Biffa agenda was postponed from the previous meeting, and it came on here. It was imperative that joint local plan was. I think you're right. Catherine and I will actually take a little more interest in making sure that agendas are manageable. And yes, I apologise, Chair, for the fact that we have a monster agenda at the moment. We'll try and move it forward as swiftly as we can, but fairly as well.
It's a thought for the future. I'm not.
No. You're. It's a perfectly valid point. So you were saying how many pages was it?
766. That's
768.
Sorry.
760. Well, the cut-off point should be 767.
So if we put it in bigger, bolder, larger print, it could have perhaps been got to 100. That's 900.
I was just going to say,
Andy?
I was just going to say we've had this with the FOP scrutiny as well, because I think we'd set 370 pages there as being excessive as well. So
okay, yeah, okay, right.
It's an service attack.
Okay, yes. The point is well made, and yes, we will. Right, we now move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the community safety partnership. And can I invite Helen?
Yeah, that's me.
To the chair. And is Maggie online?
Sorry.
Maggie Filippo, is it just yourself?
David, and I don't know if he's
David. Oh, David. Right,
Chair?
okay.
He's not,
Yeah,
he's not
Maggie.
David, go. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that Maggie is away on for work reasons, so I'm so I'm here. But I'm actually taking over from Maggie on the Community Safety Partnership as the South Oxfordshire representative as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Who is leading on this, Helen?
Me.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So item 7, off you go, Helen. Thank you.
So I'm on behalf of the partnership, I'm here to present the annual report to the committee, and I appreciate for many of you this is the first time you've had a CSP annual report, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of background. The community safety partnerships are made up of representatives from the police, local authorities, fire and rescue, probation and health authorities. These responsible authorities work together to protect local communities from crime and help people to stay safe. They're funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the priorities are agreed with him each year. It's a partnership and its focus is on areas where joint working can make a difference. Each agency also has its own activities in this area, and members have already had an opportunity to question the Chief Constable and PCC on police activities. The Community Safety Report has two recommendations. Recommendation 1 is to note the progress that the Southern Vale CSP made in 2022-23 in delivering its priorities and statutory functions. The report provides information on both the statutory duties that the partnership is required to deliver and the added value work it carries out in local communities. So the statutory duties include A, the need to develop and publish a community safety partnership plan, B, responsibilities relating to antisocial behaviour, and C, some specific duties to protect vulnerable people. This includes meeting our responsibilities under the Prevent agenda under the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act 2015, which places a duty on local authorities to have due regard to the need to prevent people from being drawn into terrorism. It also includes raising awareness of and reporting to the Secretary of State any person identified as a victim of modern slavery. And the final statutory duty is regarding carrying out a domestic homicide review, it's a DHR, when a homicide takes place in either district and the victim and offender were in a relationship. And we've completed 5 DHRs in Southern Vale, and we're currently carrying out a further 3 domestic homicide reviews. So the added value of the partnership includes providing funding towards an outreach service for the victims of domestic abuse and funding to help secure victims' homes to enable them to feel safe. Coordination of joint tasking meetings to maximise partnership working and make best use of resources, and funding community-based projects that aim to improve resilience, for example, projects that divert young people away from committed violent crime or becoming victims of crime. So the second recommendation, recommendation 2, is to support the CSP's view that the 2022-25 plan will continue to deliver core priorities and statutory functions and focus on these 4 key priorities: domestic abuse, modern slavery and exploitation, serious violence, and rural crime. The Community Safety Partnership Plan, which is appended to your paper, takes into account the aims of the Police and Crime Commissioner's plan to reduce crime and catch those that offend. Also appended to your report, you have the Oxfordshire Strategic Intelligence Assessment 2023, which is added purely for information because that is the sort of underpinning and background to the work we do. And at the very end, we've got the CSP Community Safety Fund expenditure summary for 2022 to 23. So online this evening, we have Diane Foster, who is the Licensing and Community Safety Manager, Karen Brown, who's the Community Safety Team Leader, and Chief Inspector Rachel Patterson, who's the Southern Vale Deputy Local Area Commander. I got that right. So we're happy to take any feedback or questions.
Thank you. Councillor Rouet, do you wish to add anything?
Just that, first of all, Helen is the chair of the partnership, which is why she's taken the lead. I would stress that this is not all that the councils do in terms of community safety, but what we're reporting on here is the work of the partnership. So it's those areas where partnership adds value. There are, I remember last year when we had scrutiny, we were questioned about other things to do with community safety, which are not part of the partnership.
Thank you. Helen, you mentioned that there were others on the line, Chief Inspector Rachel Patterson, Diane, and others. Could I ask whether any of you wish to make a comment or make a presentation? Maybe Chief Inspector Rachel Patterson first.
Hello, good evening, everybody. So as we said, I haven't got the presentation. We did provide to the Chief Constable, he with the Superintendent, as was commented about, actually some of those more specific policing actions last week. The plan very much is looking at the partnership approach, as we've talked about. It's very key elements that you'll see in relation to the importance of partnership, but also reduction and intervention. Particularly, you'll see in reduction of knife crime is very key about those interventions, particularly with young people, which the Community Safety Partnership has engaged in over the last 12 months and has been successful. And then just drawing your attention really to our multi-agency approach in terms of our domestic abuse, particularly what we call our MATAP process, where it's very much partnership led, where we're looking to put interventions to prevent perpetrators in domestic abuse, but also to provide victim as well. So there are kind of very key areas for us. Rural crime particularly, we have an operational group that looks at a number of the strategic aims taking place more broadly, but also in the plan how we deliver that. Karen will probably cover that a little bit more detail. We've secured some funding in relation to do some work, particularly in the rural crime space, with key community people sitting on that as well, including the farming community. So we're just echoing the key areas that we'll be continuing to work in as well. And as I say, we'll take the questions, but I'll probably hand over to Karen, particularly about our work on the rural crime.
Karen, there's an opportunity.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yes, just touching on the rural crime, we've been very successful with a bid through the Police Crime Commissioner's office, and it's a bid to the Home Office where we have secured funding for a rural crime project, and that is working jointly with West Oxfordshire as well. So we're going to be working together very much on rural acquisitive crime. So we've just got some funding of £201,000 for that project that will run from now until March 2025. Goodness. But we will be giving more information to councillors and including a press release on the proposals of how that project and how it's going to be spent in due course.
Karen, well done for securing that funding. Thank you very much. Diane, do you wish to say something?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. No, nothing particular to add to the introduction that Councillor Pickhills has provided, and the clarification that Councillor Ruane gave about the report being the work of the Community Safety Partnership over the last financial year. Yeah, no, nothing additional to add to that. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure members of the committee, having read this report, are absolutely with you on the scope and the breadth of this report. It's tackling lots and lots and lots of issues. Helen, any final comments before we go to councillors for any questions they wish to have?
No, I don't have anything to add, no.
Okay, right. Would anyone like to? Councillor Rawlings, Lee.
This might be a silly question, but I thought this was a great report, and I was really interested in the material within it, and I could see how it was building up from all the individual cases and all of the different areas of analysis. But the question that I found myself asking as I read through, and I got in the later stages towards the public health approach and so forth, and trying to identify, what I was thinking about was, how can we identify patterns? How could we perhaps, is there anything we could learn from patterns that would enable us to do some early interventions that might avoid things getting as bad as they sometimes do get? And I saw, there were lots of instances where that is being tried, where particular areas where everything's degraded, there's litter, there's broken fences, everything's heading south, and the interventions help change that situation. And I was thinking, when I look at the partnerships involved here, one of the things that aren't represented is education and schools. And I was just thinking, if we could identify patterns, if we could see neighbourhoods, areas, types of characteristics that lead to bad results in the end, is there an opportunity where we could use that information through schools, through other channels, to intervene and try and identify things that are going wrong earlier by way of an early intervention, and hopefully maybe avoiding some of the worst results that might otherwise arise?
Seems like a very good point, Helen.
I mean, a lot of the work that's being done with the youth groups is about early intervention. It's challenging the behaviours before they get really bad, I think. And the other thing is these performances that the partnership is enabling to be put on in schools, which are raising awareness with the pupils of the various sorts of exploitation that it could come across, is in effect also an early intervention. So I think that's a good example. And we've got 17 secondary schools in our district, and they're continuing to ask for this performance to be put in, and they contribute towards them, and the partnership puts in some money as well. I don't know if the officers or David want to add anything. Oh, Rachel.
Yeah, I think just to echo that, we also have links in with, we have a schools officer, Mike Dix, who actually works and has liaison as well within the schools, secondary schools, and then within the primary school piece, we also kind of have that link in as well, particularly certain things called PC Ben has just been launched as well in the local primary schools. So, you know, we do have kind of those interventions which of course feed back into the community safety, and from that point of view, we also link in quite heavily with the schools within that, certain themes in particular. So yeah, there are kind of those open avenues as well, Councillor, as well.
Councillor Andy.
I'd like to kick off with a comment on something that stood out as a really good idea, and just to say encouragement, the environmental visual audits that you guys have mentioned. Brilliant. More of those. I don't know if you can get more funding for them, but prevention is so much better than cure. Tying into that, the safe places, it could be, thanks to my privilege that I've never needed anything like that. I've never come across any advertising for them or noticed them. So I don't know if they could do with being better advertised or better shown around.
I mean, they have stickers, don't they, on the windows?
It could just be because
I think
not noticed, because I do have, as a 6'2" each tall male, I do have a great deal of privilege there.
Shall we bring Diana in, please?
Thank you. I was just going to say that we're currently undertaking some work to promote safe places at the current time, and encouraging more premises to sign up to the scheme as well. So we are actually, we're aware that we need to, that there's further work we can be doing about that. So yeah.
Not just me. The diversionary projects to deter youth from criminality, great idea, but I'm struggling to work out how we measure them. Because if you can't measure the success, you've got, you mentioned they fill out forms for review, but that's what people say. So I don't know how we measure success on that.
We partly measure through case studies, which is quite a real way of measuring, isn't it, rather than statistic. Have we got to help me out?
Because my instinct is to reinforce it, but to justify reinforcing it, I want to be able to measure the effect.
Bring Karen in, please. Thank you. Yeah, you're on mute, Karen.
I'm on mute, sorry, apologies.
No, it's fine.
The diversionary project, I think, is this the summer escape project that you were referring to?
It's entitled Diversionary Projects to Deter from Criminality. And then we had about 2 or 3 case studies of them. But I was wondering if we can measure the effect, because then we can justify reinforcing it more.
We tend to look at crime data prior to carrying out a diversionary activity, because then we can see where the need is for that particular project, and then we will look again afterwards to see whether it's actually made a difference. You're right, it is very difficult to measure because I would say we're very lucky to have one of the safest places in the country we're living in, and any diversionary project, it very much is to disrupt possibly some very low level antisocial behaviour, but we do try and measure it with our crime data.
Yeah, shooting down the low level stuff before it becomes worse is probably one of the best things to do as well. So
can I bring Rachel in, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's just echoing what Karen says, you know, it is very case study. We also have some information as well, some intelligence around that, but ultimately it will become to whether our interventions have been successful, and some of that is whether they've had, you know, criminality and they've gone on to commit other crimes. It tends to be one of the measures at the moment, but as for Karen, we've all talked about, you know, that is one of the ways we look at it, you know, but yes, it's probably so far that's the measure.
Okay. No. Sorry, Andy, go on, one more.
Final one
and then we'll move on.
Almost a comment that confused me a bit. I looked at the OPCC results survey for whether people have reported crime, and I know it's a very self-selecting sample, but the one thing that really did jump out to me that 77% hadn't been, 16% had been, which left me confused as to the missing 7%, because you either have or haven't, surely. So I don't know what's happened there. It's just that numbers jump out to me when they don't add up. And it's on page 72, the bottom of that. And
okay,
it's confused me.
Pause that for people to think about it. Whether
7% don't know.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to bring in Councillor Fox or Catherine at the moment, and then Councillor Morgan, and I noticed that Joe Robb online has popped her hand up, so I'll come to you in a moment, Joe. Okay, Catherine, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the focus on modern slavery, which I'm really happy to see as a focus. I think that's really important. I should note, I think it's incredible what you guys are doing with £92,000. Well done. I was interested in relation to modern slavery. There is seems to be no allocation in that fund in regards to modern slavery. So I was just wondering how that focus was financed. But I'm also concerned in the report, it suggests, page 51 of our pack, says that there's been a 50% rise in South Oxfordshire and a 53% rise in Vale in cases of modern slavery in 2022 compared to the average for 2019-2021. I find that figure quite concerning, and particularly with changes in the Illegal Migration Act that are coming through now, and the shifting of modern slavery from immigration, from safeguarding, it's now being put in with immigration and asylum. And I wonder what practical effect that legislative change has for our partnership working, our ability to keep people safe, but also how are we responding to what seems to be a clear rise in cases? Thank you.
Who wants to have a go at that one? Karen?
Oh, sorry, I'm getting too carried away with pressing the button. Apologies.
Oh, we thought you were going to be the expert witness at the moment, but have a go, Karen.
There's a couple of things that we have in Oxfordshire that probably don't feature in that expenditure, and one of them is that we have a resource through the county who is Nicola Bell. She's an anti-slavery coordinator, and she works across Oxfordshire, and we work very closely together on individual cases or any cases that are reported to us. And we have a process in place which is on our Jarvis, on our intranet pages, for any staff who do come across any concerns around people that are unfortunately, as a risk of exploitation. So, that hasn't featured on our expenditure, but it's something that we can do and feature on that to show that in the future. The second thing I would just say about the numbers is that we are seeing more people having the confidence to come forward. So though those figures may seem high, it is very much because people have the trust and will know that action is going to be taken, and that's why we're seeing those numbers increase.
Okay, thank you. Diane, then David. Diane, please.
I just lowered my hand because Karen covered off very clearly what I was going to say about the numbers. So yeah, nothing additional to add to what Karen's already said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yeah, the increase, sometimes an increase in crime statistics is a good thing because it's people reporting it. 4 years ago when I first came onto the CSP, modern slavery wasn't a thing that we ever looked at, whereas now it's one of the focuses. So that's why the figures go up. I would make a point that was about the thing that was raised of identifying modern slavery with immigration, because certainly statistics from last year showed that most modern slavery involved British people who were being lured into criminality or whatever. And I think it's a mistake from a policy point of view to link immigration with modern slavery, because quite often it's not people from overseas, it's UK citizens who are being involved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, Tony, please.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Pickhills for arranging and organising the presentation from the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner. That was really, really positive. One of the things that came out of that was news about certain increases in investment, especially with regard to community officers, and actually building on Councillor Cook's point about prevention being better than. How will the safety partnership actually monitor the delivery of that and actually the effectiveness of that? How would we sort of be able to look at how effective that's been and actually putting it into place?
I think that's probably a question for Rachel, I would think.
Yeah, I mean,
Rachel?
hello. Yes. So basically what we have had is what the Chief Constable said is we've had an uplift in officers, neighbourhood officers. So those are officers that essentially are going into our neighbourhoods. So in terms of we have a health check process ourselves internally where we look at areas of what investigations they hold, how much ASB incidents that they attend. Also some of the work that you'll see probably in the presentations talking about the operations that have taken place. So those officers go in to support neighbourhood teams already that are working in the South and Vale area particularly. We have looked at areas where essentially we're having kind of for us, we're having an uplift of officers rather than the PCSOs, because probably what the Chief Constable may have mentioned is actually we still have PCSOs supporting our teams, but actually we're having those officers now coming into it. So in terms of how we monitor that, we do have a process internally on our own local policing area which looks at the performance of that, but we can certainly take that away and see how we could feed that into the community safety partnership as a bit of work going forward as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Joe, Councillor Rob, thank you for coming and thank you for listening, Joe, very much. You're on mute, sorry. Oh, you're not. Dial out and come back in again, maybe. Take care. Right. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Gladstone, Ron, thank you.
Thank you. Just a general comment on the reports. I think their reports are very good actually, and they do show that in these areas we have fairly low numbers, but I do worry sometimes by the percentages, because a fairly low change in the number can result in a fairly high percentage, and it makes things look either very good or very bad.
Absolutely.
So I think in some cases it's better to drop the percentages if the numbers are too low.
Helen,
yeah,
would you like to
good point? Yeah,
comment on that?
That is the case, because saying 50% increase in 2 is 3. But it's not still not a lot. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
Well, lots of people are nodding their heads online, so that's fine. Okay, Joe, you want to try again, Joe Roll?
She's gone again.
Oh, Joe's disappeared again. So we'll let Joe comment when she comes back on. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Roberts, Judy.
It was about the alcohol and the under 18s hospital admission. I mean, I'm thinking back a few years when there was quite a serious problem about young people coming out of clubs and having to have street passes, and my feeling was that that has actually diminished, and yet we're still seeing above average hospitalisation for alcohol in this age group. So I was wondering quite why that's the case, because I would have thought that COVID and the lack of the nighttime economy would have had a benefit on that, but it doesn't seem to be. So it's page 46 of the report, but 103 of the pack.
300 and sorry, my computer being very. Is that part of the strategic intelligence assessment? Is it part of the
Page 103 you want to online?
Yes, it is the strategic.
Yeah, so that is the data that is prepared for us, that comes from county. So yeah, that's data we're given. So I can't really comment on that data.
Well, I suppose I wondered whether Rachel would like to comment on.
I mean,
it was a serious problem not that long ago, and yet I'm not sure it's certainly around this area, but it may still be in Oxford and Jarwell. I don't know.
So I think in terms of what we have a nighttime economy meeting every Monday. We have officers go out in the nighttime economy in the market towns. We have very close liaison with the licensing officers and the licensing team as well. We go out as part of that process. It's also a lot of engagement and licensing checks with the licensees. I wouldn't want to kind of put a big generalisation of that, but we're at the meeting that's held when we look at what's happened over the weekend before, and then we have a look at what's happening in the week ahead. You know, we're not seeing particularly people going into licensed premises underage for drinking. Obviously, there is admissions that do come into the accident and emergency departments as well. In terms of where alcohol gets sourced, you know, that could be, and I don't want to have a big generalisation, but it could be actually taking place through, you know, other means rather than actually the licensed premises. You know, because obviously from the licensing point of view, you know, they would be, licensee would be subject to a review if that took place. So in terms of alcohol and underage drinking problems wise, the officers aren't going out to incidents of young people in medical kind of incidents that I'm seeing on a 24-hour basis locally. How those figures would be, as I say, about admissions, it could be other ways of getting alcohol.
Okay. As a rule,
just one small point. I somewhat on the theme of where I was going earlier. I don't know to what extent heat maps of where crime and problems are happening are shared both with local councils, and you mentioned the secondary schools and schools, whether they can usefully use an output from all this data that would help them in understanding the kind of issues, or confirm probably what they already have some sense of, or anyway, but just to help them again in terms of targeting where problems might be coming from.
anybody to pick up that particular point? Not obvious. No. We'll note it as a thought for going forward. I think we're there on this particular item, and I am particularly struck with Councillor Rawlins' comment about looking for patterns in behaviour, because I think if you look for patterns, you might snuff out loads of incidents rather than just tackling with the odd ones that pop up. And I'm looking for a recommendation from the committee. Julie, go on, say it out loud. 'Cause, I
It's a
think
very good report, very comprehensive, with a great deal of work that isn't being shouted about, obviously demonstrated.
Yeah.
And what Candida's drawing my attention to.
Sorry, it's not very big, is it? Let's see. So it's just the recommendations on the report.
On the front,
as well.
on the front
Yeah.
cover, yes, right.
So you could,
Right, well, the recommendations which are on page
page 14.
page 14. I'll read them out very quickly. Recommendations. A, to note the progress that South and Vale Community Partnership, CSP, have made in 22-23 in delivering its priorities and statutory functions. B, to support the CSP's view that the 22-25 plan will deliver core priorities and statutory functions focus on 4 key priority areas. A, domestic abuse. Secondly, modern slavery exploitation. 3, serious violence. And 4, rural crime. And I think we will add to that. Thank you for a great report. And I think we should recognise the professionalism of these, of the professionals on the call. Well, and David Rowan and Helen, well, yes, who are professionals.
Obviously.
So, yes, obviously. That's taken as read, really, in a way. But would we be happy with that recommendation? Yes. Right. Okay. So we'll vote on that, and please, all those in favour of that recommendation.
Thank you.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. And Rachel, Diane, Karen, thank you for the report, and thank you for your contribution to keeping South Oxfordshire a very, very safe place. And
Vale.
oh goodness me! And Vale, for keeping it safe. Sorry, thank you, Kath, for picking me up on that. And we thank you for the report, and it's very, very good. Helen, David, thank you as well. Thank you. Right, that concludes that item. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Keep picking me up on that, Catherine. I'm going to get to the end. I'm so used to SOVC this and SOVC that. Right, okay. We now move on to 8. Biffa Contract Performance 2023. And I welcome Councillor Coleman, Mark, and Councillor Cooper, Sue, and there are other officers attached to this, and also representation from Biffa as well. So thank you very much. So I wonder if you could, who is leading? Sue. Okay, so off you go. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll read out the official opening first. Now I want to add on 2 comments of my own. As a key frontline service, which has a direct impact on every household in the 2 districts, the Biffa Waste and Street Cleansing contract is of great importance to residents and the councils, as you all well know. Biffa's performance is subject to review by this committee, and the report included with the agenda pack shows their performance for the calendar year 2022, i.e. last year. There are 3 key areas which the report covers. These are the key performance, customer satisfaction, and council satisfaction. These 3 have been scored using the defined system and then reviewed by the head of service to take into account anything which is not part of the methodology but should be taken into account when reaching a final rating. Overall, the rating is considered good, but the report does note that there are some areas of weakness in performance. As with most things, there's usually room for improvement, particularly surrounding the street cleansing. And this is something that we jointly will be monitoring along with officers to see how this can be improved as we move forward. This report is not intended to update members on the contract extension or the purchase of new waste vehicles, as information on those areas will be presented separately at a later date. But from my point of view, I wanted to apologise very much for the lateness of the report. As I say, it was the year ended almost a year ago. It's quite ironic that it was left off the last scrutiny agenda because that looked quite full, and what happened to it on an even fuller one this time. Anyway, the other point to note is we are feeding back on the framework of an assessment that's put in place it might be that in future we need to change that in some way. Is there a better way of keeping more up to date with the key performance indicators, things like that we might like to think out from a different point of view? Particularly since one bears in mind that this contract has been on the go for 14 years now for South, almost, and a year later for Vale. So, you know, it's been in place a long time. Right, so we're looking at the defined framework, and I'm very pleased that we've got Mr. Francis Drew, Fran from Biffa, here to answer questions, and Louise, who looks after the administration of this contract and knows all sorts of things about the contract. Very useful contact. So we'd be very pleased to, you know, have your comments, answer any questions that we can.
Mark, would you like to?
I'll summarise at the end, but also we have Paul Fielding and Scott Williams, both officers, to answer questions as well.
Right. Well then, can I turn Fran or Louise and Paul, whether you want to make any comments at this point? No. Okay. Paul?
No particular comment. Hello, no particular comments, but happy to take any questions.
Right, okay, will do. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the line, Paul. Right, okay. So councillors, questions. Councillor Rawlins, please, and then Foxhall and Councillor Cook. Yes, thank you.
In the context of the situation and the tight labour market out there and the need to change rounds and so on, overall, I thought that and the report I thought reflected this. I think the performance has been pretty decent in that context. I was a bit confused by the street cleansing thing, and I didn't know quite how that is done, because I think one of the challenges that might be there is that there's a lot of growth in the edge of the street, so a lot of grass and so forth, and whether there's anything done to actually kill that off, or whether we just try and deal with it by having a traditional vehicle going along with a nice rotating broom, and it doesn't always cut it when the growth is heavy, and whether that's the kind of issue, or whether we haven't just got, because of the staffing challenges, we're not getting the vehicles out there enough, or what it is. But clearly residents noticed that, and that came through as well. So it clearly is an issue which needs to be addressed.
I think there's sort of two bits to the edges of the roads, if you like. The street sweeping, there are often problems because there are cars parked in the way.
Yes,
so
yes.
you can't always get everywhere.
And
And then there's the verges, which I mean, it's my perception actually that within towns and villages, the centres are kept relatively clean. It's along the verges where I wish we as a country did more on prevention and stop people chucking rubbish out of their car windows rather than having to spend a fortune picking it up afterwards. It is a lot more difficult to do. It gets embedded in the grass, and there are safety issues for Biffa. For example, on the A34, we have to wait till the A34 is actually closed before it's deemed to be safe for somebody to go and pick up the rubbish. And the A34 is particularly good at collecting rubbish, as those who use it will know. Yeah, I don't think that's
There's also, particularly for things like the major roads, or where we're talking about verges, it's a seasonal issue as well, because of cutting back the hedgerow. You know, when in the height of summer, when the hedgerow or the grass is long, then you tend not to see so much debris that's been discarded. But then as we get towards autumn, and we've had the cut back of the hedges after the nesting season, then you start to see. So I guess the problem is, and we're working with Biffa and the officers to try and work out whether there's any more flexibility in how we define where we do this street cleansing. We could do it by strict rota. We're going to do street A on the 1st of January, street B, etc., etc. The problem with that is you end up cleaning roads that don't actually need cleaning. Conversely, cleaning the roads when people are already reporting that there is an issue, you're almost too late because the issue is already there. You know, people have reported it, so you'll be perceived as being late.
Over time, Oxfordshire seemed to have cut back on the amount of cutting that happens, partly to save money, and partly because everybody wants to see
The biodiversity.
biodiversity and all of that stuff going on. And some of it, I think, has been subbed out to local parishes and bits and bobs. Tying that stuff together and linking the contractor activity is perhaps a thought to see where that could go.
I think that you were right in your first part of the time you asked was that I'm not convinced that we've always had as many people working on street cleaning as we might do. It's obviously we've got to deal with the waste collection, and I think things are better now. I'll ask Fran to comment in a minute. As regards vehicle drivers and such like, when you're short of people, you put them on the essential things to do,
Of course,
with waste collection. So we did have a team going out where parishes had asked for extra cleaning, and sometimes they go, 2 out of the 3 sessions they were supposed to do, but the third one got missed off because there weren't enough. It was shortage of personnel. But
Fran, if you want to comment, please.
Yeah, so during COVID, we definitely struggled to deploy staff, even with additional resources. We had at one point 30 agency employees inducted on one day. That obviously has reduced. Last year, we put in a significant pay increase for the crews, and we therefore saw an upturn in our deployment numbers, and that was progressive throughout the year. And I think the economy has changed towards the end of last year, so that that drove a change as well. If I commented for that particular year, we ended with much stronger numbers than we started. Present day would be near full deployment, and probably the best deployment we've had on the life of the contract.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you very much. Catherine. And then it'll be Andy, and then it'll be.
Oh, I didn't have my hand up. I was just.
Oh, you didn't. You were just. Oh, right. Okay. You still have to ask a question. Catherine, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on the street cleaning as well, because I wonder whether, to an extent, the street cleaning dissatisfaction it's a comms issue, because obviously streets, I wonder if there's some confusion for residents, or it's unclear to residents where responsibility is district council, where responsibility is OCC, where responsibility is Thames Water. So perhaps, and I think it's a really striking comparison with fly tipping, because with fly tipping there is a very clear reporting and a very quick response. And so the satisfaction is not with the fact that there isn't any fly tipping, it's the satisfaction is with the response of the councils. And I wonder if we could improve the comms, we could improve the satisfaction, because people will just have a sense of understanding how they get an issue sorted. And it might even be as simple as making it much clearer. If this is the kind of problem, you go to OCC. If this is the problem, you go to Thames Water. If this, and so I just wonder if there's an extent to that.
I think you're right. Well, not I think you are. I know you're right. The issue is trying to identify, who has that responsibility. People can report, for example, on Fix My Street, which will then go to one agency and then will get transferred to another agency. So I would link this with very similar problem to emptying of litter bins. Streets is who owns that litter bin and who is responsible. And you might think because it's a fairly major road that it's automatically going to be ourselves. If the road's not been adopted, then it's not. So I think you've got a very valid point. I don't know how easy it is to solve by identifying each particular area. We are currently, for example, on grounds maintenance, I know it's not the same thing, but we're going through a review of all land. We call it 250 pieces of land, which is a piece of land in the Vale that we're currently maintaining, which we shouldn't be. So there will be something similar, but we can have a look at it with.
I'm going to bring Paul in because he's popped up his hand. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. And just to back up the point that was said, we have had issues, particularly with litter bins, some litter bins owned by parishes and some that are owned by districts. And we're communicating out to parishes to say, let us know when there's a problem with litter bins, because we have had experience of parishes taking things into their own hands for all good reasons, but then we're having to resolve that issue. So it's another example of where knowing exactly who is responsible for what would really help.
Well, it's on a similar vein. I was going to say is that quite a big piece of work going on at the moment to identify all the bins which are ours in each of the parishes, and they're all being marked and put on the GIS system. So maybe when that's finished, we can make it clearer which are our bins, because we should know them, which is always useful.
Kat, going back to the point you were making, I think maybe we should look at the feasibility of whether we can do something similar sort of exercise in terms of street cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
So we can identify who, I know, for example, in Farringdon, there are particular roads that are untidy, but they're not actually council, they've not been adopted, so that it's not our responsibility to clean them. However, someone has the responsibility, and then we can go on to the enforcement side. So is it being looked after? So I can't promise we can do it. We can fix the problem, but we certainly can look at it.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to apologise to Ron because I was going to come to you next, but Joe's got a hand up. So before the comms go down, Joe, I'll invite you to the party, please. Hi, Joe. Thank you.
Hi, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, right. I apologise. I'm sorry I'm not there in person.
Thank goodness we can.
Yeah, well, maybe not. I wanted to ask, following up on this very important point about street cleansing, and Stefan, you will know personally as well, the A4130, pretty much the whole run of it between Henley and Crowmarsh, in the spring in particular, this year and last year was a disgrace. And I received dozens of complaints about the state of the verges on the A4130 around Bix especially. But when we're talking about monitoring that particular key performance target, obviously Biffa aren't required, or we're not required rather, to report nationally on that target, National Indicator 195, improved street and environmental cleanliness. But we have it's very hard to measure. We have an independent organisation that assesses this and then reports back, assesses it against the DEFRA requirements and then reports back to us. Is anyone able to give more detail about the methodology they use? This, I guess, is one for Paul, because I mean, I'm interested to know when they go out, how frequently they go to measure this. And Paul, I'm sure, as you can imagine, I think sometimes the reports from residents are going to give us a different picture to perhaps what the report of an independent inspector might give us if they pop around once or twice a year.
Okay, we'll bring Paul in on that one, please.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I would always say is, if there are issues that residents spot, we would always say to report them through to us, because that's always kind of helpful intelligence. So if there are problems, we do want them reported through either to Biffa or through to ourselves. In terms of the methodology, I can see that Louise is in the room and she will know a lot better than I will the details on the methodology. So I wonder, Louise, are you able to come in on that one?
Yes, Louise indicated that she could, so we'll hand to Louise. Thank you.
The methodology is still graded through the characteristics that we had with NI 195, and then if anyone else can remember, that was previously BVPI 199. So it goes back quite far and it stays consistent. So it set grades for litter and detritus, and the independent officer that actually goes round does select random locations in amongst that grading. So there are rural roads, there are faster roads, there are shop areas, there are estate areas, and they will take about 240 each time surveys they do to give us the averaging that we get, and then each score is weighted. It's completely independent. Biffa don't know where they're going, so they don't have the oversight to visit there first. It's all independent, and the information comes back for us to see. And what we can do is when we get that raw data back, we can see those areas that if they slip below the standard, we can then visit and see what's happening.
And the information provided back includes photos of the areas. The surveys are carried out every 3 months, and the contractor is keeper and tidy.
Chair, can I have a quick follow-up question, please?
Yes, you can, Joe. Go for it.
Thank you, Stefan. In terms of this issue, Councillor Foxall raised the important point about communication. I think the key issue for residents is understanding who to report this to and the information that Biffa needs. So when we had some litter issues at Bix, people were saying, oh, I've reported it to OCC. Well, it's not OCC. So I think we do need to do some comms around making clear to people who to report to and what information is needed in terms of location. You know, it's not enough just to say it's on the A4130. You know, we need, you guys need far more sort of clearer detail about where the problem is, because the A4130 is a long road. Also, I think we need some more comms around animal carcasses. Sadly, particularly at this time of year, we see a lot of deer carcasses in our rural areas. People don't know who to report them to, and of course it's to Biffa. So I think we could do some more comms around that as well. Thanks very much, though.
Thank you, Joe, for those comments, please. Thank you. Now in terms of Ron and then Tony. Ron, please.
After all these long answers, this is a fairly trivial question, perhaps. Customer satisfaction was rated as fair according to the scoring, but then it was decided to upgrade it to good for a number of reasons. The first of these reasons was the number of formal complaints received was 0. Well, now the number of formal complaints received is 2. So I was wondering whether this upgrade from fair to good still applies.
I think the answer is yes. It was an error. 2 just got left out and they were discovered, and Paul looked at them again and decided that was still a fair, you know.
It's in a way, Ron, your point on the last report, that a small percentage changes.
Yes.
you get 1 complaint and you're damned, and you get 2 complaints and you're fair. It may be.
So I asked the same question when it changed, and said, you know, does that make a material difference? Because I don't know whether 2 complaints is good, you know, or whether it's horrendous, you know. So, but we've got Scott Williams on, and he gave me some examples of statistics for other areas, and hopefully he can reel those off. Okay, Scott, what you said, please, and that might hopefully I'll answer your question. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I think my camera might be having a moment because I can't see myself, but you may be able to see me, so all good.
We can see you and hear you perfectly. Yes,
good. Fantastic. So previously to working for South and Vale, I joined South and Vale on the 21st of August. Previously to that, I was working for Gloucestershire authorities, namely Forest Dean District Council being one of them, who actually have a contract with Biffa. They're a very rural council, similar to South and Vale as well. In 2021, there were 19 formal complaints. In comparison to the Forest Dean, I would consider that to be high. If you then look at 2 formal complaints over 2 districts, which equates to 1 each, that would be considered very, very good. Similarly, I've also worked with other Gloucestershire authorities, and again, 1 formal complaint over an entire year, given the amount of services that are provided and the amount of residents that are touched by the service, again, it would be considered very, very good.
Okay, thank you, Scott, very much. Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, building on Councillor Foxall's point about comms, especially with regard to street cleansing, we often communicate with residents quite intensely around, especially around the Christmas period, with regard to changing the collection dates. Could we actually use some of that a bit to actually use that communication method to communicate around sort of the street cleansing? You know, if we're sending them a letter saying you've been changed, the date is going to change from X to Y, or a little leaflet or something, actually including some contact details on there might be helpful.
Louise?
Yeah, so the reason we target Christmas with the collection side is because we know that's a very high contamination period, and we want to get contamination. I think the best time and something we can take forward is around March, when you keep Britain tidy, keep the annual litter pick campaign, and I think it would go nicely at that point, and it's something we can definitely incorporate and look into.
Good.
Yes, I mean, going back to this idea, do we use Fix My Street to report bins? And does the county council system, they don't go through to us, or does it just ping back as most of us tell us?
Well, not
this is not to us.
Basically, if you put things into Fix My Street, they have to be extracted and manually put into our system, which is why they're not very keen on doing it. I did try hard to get us to use Fix My Street because it's so easy, because you can take a photo of whatever, where you are, and immediately report it back. But we've been assured this is not really a good idea. And the two computer systems within the county and the district won't talk to each other.
Are there any changes likely to happen with that? Because it seems blindingly obvious that Fix My Street is a fantastic vehicle for everything.
Please tell our office.
Well, I think, and I'm
sorry, I've raised something contentious.
Very well, at the very edge of my knowledge envelope here, but actually Fix My Street is independent. So it's not owned by the.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's the brilliant vehicle for doing the job.
Yeah.
Therefore, we should be using it as an integrated system. Why aren't we? Oh, hello.
Just for those
who crept up behind me.
Yeah, apologies. I'm Mark Minion, Head of Corporate Services at Southend Vale, and one of my responsibilities is customer services. Fix My Street, as Councillor Cooper has said, is not our responsibility. OCC withdrew some of the services, which are district services, from that quite recently. What we're doing internally, working with Louise and colleagues, is looking at the CRM that we purchased earlier this year, which is a GOS platform, to do better reporting of all the issues that you're talking about tonight. So street cleansing, dead dogs and carcasses and such like. Bins, you can report through our website. If you've got a missed bin or a broken bin, you can report that at the moment, and that gets picked up and pushed through to Biffa at the moment. So there's no gap there. The bit that's the gap is the Fix My Streets thing, which we're actively looking at the moment. We're working with Louise and her team to see what we can bring on forward quickly to give better customer experience around what we're calling enviro crime, so fly tipping and fly posting. That is in train at the moment, and working with our supplier on that, which will improve reporting and also the resident experience. More importantly, they get more of a proactive, interactive approach to that. We're getting there on it. There's work to do still. Hopefully that gives you some assurance that we're not ignoring these issues that Councillor Cooper has raised with me many times.
We're thinking about it.
Thank you. Can I come back on that? Because I knew that would be contentious and doesn't work. But anyway.
It's not contentious. We actually all agree with you.
But one thing I think we could possibly do, and I know you try very hard to liaise with the A34, but it has been closed a lot of late. And I certainly, you're right about spring vegetation and things. So we could liaise with the OCC timetable of where they're cutting back, certainly on the major roads. So because they do have a timetable, and they don't only, a lot of them they only do once a year.
Yep.
So it would be easy to plug into that one. That was my one point. Dog bins, this is another contentious one. I now don't know, they will go into joint bins.
Yeah, well, there's no such thing as a dog bin.
But it's the labelling of that is interesting. Fly tipping is really good, but under KPT 5, a lot of those ones that are missed collections, unfortunately, are missed collections from the same place over and over again. And that's often because that particular street has a very difficult access, gets easily blocked, or whatever. Is there anything that can be done about perhaps, because usually what happens is they get missed and then they send back the small environmental vehicle that they can go around. I wonder why they just don't send a small environmental vehicle around the first time.
Okay, so I'll allow Louise to address that, but from my experience, I wouldn't say it's always the same streets that are being missed, but I do accept there are some areas, and there's one in particular in Botley, for example.
Yes. But as a counter.
But the important piece there is that we report that it is reported, and then when it is reported, it does go through to the system, and then it will be annotated that this is a persistent problem on a particular round. And so, we've got to, the message is it shouldn't happen, but where it does, we must ensure that the residents continue to report it every single time.
I think it's an important point being made that all the councillors, if you get any sort of complaints, make sure that the people concerned have complained through the proper channels, because we're very good at going out to, pick up the pieces afterwards. Yeah. But if they don't know, they don't.
I'll give way in a minute for Louise, but there was also another aspect to this. One is a missed bin, another one is an incomplete round. And to a resident, it may well appear that it's a misbin when it's actually an incomplete round. And I'll let Louise explain the difference of those when she responds. But I agree with I agree with your point.
Okay, so a missed bin is one where the crew have been in the road and missed the bin for whatever reason. They have, human error, it does happen. An incomplete round is where the vehicle hasn't physically been able to get to that road to miss the bin in the first place. So they are recorded very simply, and with the incomplete, it purely is the road that they go into. So if the road, like mine, there's 100 odd properties, the next one might only have 10 properties in the road. So that's how the statistics can vary quite a lot. With the narrow access vehicle, and I think Fran will probably agree here, there isn't a huge capacity on that vehicle. So we try to keep it to the roads that really need it. So where there are roads that they can't get into because the vehicle parked in the corner, that's not the vehicle we should be using. We should be using the normal vehicles. So when that vehicle does go back to try to get a connection, if it is on the narrow access, that's often done at a weekend when they shouldn't be working. So that would incur extra costs. Crews willing to come in and to take those collections on for the bins. So it's about capacity and making sure that narrow vehicle is quite small, and if you've seen it, it's about the capacity on that vehicle and the number of properties it needs to service.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking that there's a particular one where 9 times out of 10 there's a vehicle parked on the corner, and the main vehicle cannot get down it.
Okay.
And we do try to work with
Let's not talk about individuals. We're looking for patterns. Yeah, you're right.
And there's rural ones all over the place where there's a specific street that is always likely to be difficult.
And on a whole, if there's an area like that, we will try to work with the residents, if we try to sort of cars and things like that, and try to work and get in there.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Cook and then Councillor Rawlings. Councillor Cook, please.
It's compulsory for me to ask the question, so I hate it.
I wasn't drinking. You weren't drinking.
Councillor Roberts' point about the repeated omissions reminded me that I think at least once and maybe twice in the last 2 years I've suggested that we have a metric for number of properties that have multiple omissions, because it always does seem to be the same ones. I've got one resident in my ward who's got me on speed dial in this bid. Poor chap, he's disabled as well, so he get through to me, I get through to Biffa, and they sort him out. But if there are weak areas or spots or individual houses where there are repeated problems, because if you have one missed bin, it's something that happens. If it happens all the time, you're going to get really annoyed.
Yeah. So we do actually record them.
Oh, good.
Yeah, sorry. So we do have a repeat missed list. So properties will enter that list. Supervisors will assure the collections and that will be either they will be with the crew, they will ensure that the collection has taken place afterwards. And once that's put back in place and works normally, let's say, and the service is delivered, then it will drop off that list. So we do very much do that. It does rely on the missed bin being reported to us though. So sometimes it may be reported in a different format and that doesn't get to us. But if it is reported to Biffa, then we will pick that up.
Thank you.
Councillor Rawlings.
Very simple. We're following on the street cleansing stuff and looking specifically at point 46. Dissatisfaction with cleanliness, tidiness of the roads and the streets is also emerging. That language sounds more urban to me. Many respondents reporting them to be overgrown with vegetation, causing blocked drains and gutters, which is leading to flooding. So if you've got grass or whatever growing in those gutters, and then you get leaves in gentle rain build up as a sort of congealed mass, and then you have a decent storm, the whole congealed mass flops down into the drain, blocks it, and then you get a flood, and then people really react. So that seems to be what's being written there. I don't know if I'm interpreting that correctly, but the other question that emerges for me is actually there's one thing that's sweeping and cleaning, and another thing that's killing that vegetation where it didn't ought to be, in order that things can function.
Yeah, and you're right. It's two very different issues. So Louise.
Yeah. So you're right, and also as Eva mentioned earlier, there is with the responses that we received, it is very clear that residents do need that understanding of what is our responsibility, what is county council's responsibility. There were comments around weeds, which obviously weed spraying wouldn't come under the district council, so that's a county council responsibility. And again, with the drain emptying. So I think it is a lesson learned for next time when we do any surveys that we help with that understanding to make sure we're getting the right information back ourselves and the satisfaction of what we cover rather than the county.
I think it links very well with the point that you were making, Kat, really, where I mean, it doesn't make a difference to the resident. The resident still has a problem, but we need to be able to identify how it gets resolved. Who does it go to?
Yeah. Councillors, I'm going to wrap this up in about a couple of minutes because I think we've done a good job. Councillor Morgan, Tony?
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the issues about moving to a once a year grass cutting operation actually does exacerbate the situation. For example, in June, we had a weekend when we actually had some, the technical term I think is convective rainfall, actually just after the grass was cut, and actually caused quite a bit of flooding in certainly in Dinkop.
Oh, I see, okay.
You know, so it's where in actual fact the grass was in such a big clump, it did actually block the drains, and actually the convective rain and the movement of water meant we actually have flooding in certain areas.
Yes, in a way, Louise's argument is an argument for unitary authority, because I often sort of say, don't complain to drains, you should be complaining to OCC. Unfortunately, as a triple hat or a double hat in this particular case, I mean, it seems daft that we're aiming it in two directions. Sweeping the leaves, SODC, Biffa responsibility, would do a great job. But when the leaves go down into the drain, it's OCC for sucking them out and moving them forward. So that was just come. Can I ask one question from me as chair? And I'm picking up on what Joe said. Joe, I'll bring you in a moment. On the Bix bypass, which is the fair mile out of Henley going up on the left, litter. Tons and tons of litter. Is there a mechanism, maybe Louise is the way, is there a mechanism for us to actually put some secret video cameras on and actually catch drivers that chuck their Coke can out the window with a number plate recognition and clobber them with a £2,000 fine? Question.
It's something that's being looked at through, we're on civil parking enforcement now rather than, taking people to court like we used to. And it's one of the things that Andrea goes to the meetings of an organisation called Patrol, which is that oversees the civil parking thing, because it's all done online, but you need an ultimate appeal area.
This particular area and other areas are hotspots.
Yeah.
So therefore, you would get a good hit rate on.
Well, I can remember about 20 years ago, we had some cameras hidden in what looked like a Coke can, but they must have disappeared. I thought they were Coke cans.
Joe, I'll bring you in on this, and Scott, I'll bring you in later, please. Thanks, Joe.
Agree completely, Stefan. And I know that some other local authorities have CCTV in litter hotspots. It's not covert CCTV. It's there to make it clear to people that if they chuck their macas out the window, they will be caught. But of course, we also use CCTV in some fly tipping hotspots. And I'm sure Paul can talk to us about that. I just wanted to say regarding Biffa, I have always found in every dealing I have with Biffa, and I have weekly dealings with Biffa, that you guys are remarkably responsive, really easy to get hold of. On a personal level, I've found you to be an excellent company to deal with. So, and I know that when residents deal with you, when they realise that they need to report things, you're very, very responsive. So just on a personal level, I wanted to say that, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to touch on a point, reference a question that was made earlier regarding litter picking on the A34, and it was just to confirm that Biffa have been working with the contractor that works for OCC, and there has been litter picking performed. We've taken some photographs, and that's going to be part of a comms message going out next year. basically to promote the work that's being done. But what we're finding is that we're engaging with OCC a lot more now, and we're hopeful that that will pave the way for them letting us know when they're coning areas off, and then we can obviously get in there and perform the litter picking.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we'll conclude this. On page 145, there is a recommendation, and it's that Scrutiny Committee considers the performance report. And do you want to make any additional comments apart from we seem to be generally in the direction of this is a good report and sort of well done to Biffa for doing it. Are there any additional measures we wish to add? The council on the committee, sorry. No,
I think it's the comms question that's come up a lot, hasn't it?
Okay.
Obviously, that's something that's already being worked on.
Yeah.
So
but I think we can highlight that as well. So we accept the report, say good, well done, but the comms message needs to be looked at.
I was going to say that we also took from the report that street cleaning was clearly identified as an area of concern, and we have satisfied ourselves that going forward that's being addressed.
Thank you. So if we take that as a recommendation from the committee, I'm going to ask for a vote on that. So all those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. Mark, do you want to make a final comment? You said you were going to sum up. Yes,
I was, but you've already done it for
no.
me.
Anyway.
We really need to get on.
Yeah, so very briefly, we are aware that we need to keep track of some of the performance tracking, and we're developing with Biffa and the officers a dashboard which will be reviewed at the operational meetings and then also at the high level strategic meetings. So I'm convinced we'll start to get a bit more meaningful information. So going back to the is it an incomplete round? Well, actually, an incomplete round, if it's something that's outside of the contractor's remit, i.e. a block road because of a car parking, then that shouldn't hit them. However, if it's there because the vehicle's broken down, again, then we should come back. So we're looking for a little bit more granularity, which hopefully will improve our performance. But Biffa now, just about, I think, have we signed off the contract for the extension?
No, we're not supposed to be.
No.
Well, so what I was going to say is, we are in the process of doing that, and then this contract runs out in 26. So we'll be in the new contract.
Well, I would just say finally, thank you, Paul online, and thank you, Scott online, for your help in this matter, and thank you, Mark and Sue. But especially, I'll thank Fran and Louise. You were at the sharp end of this, so your greatest praise should go to you. So thank you. Thank you. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Okay. What we'll do is we'll have a pause for 2 minutes. We want to go and get some water, and we're going to move the officers about as well. Yes. Right. Yeah. So 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you.
Just going to spend 1 minute per minute on the joint local plan piece.
Quick